Hello, everyone. This is Charles Walter Buntjer, and it's the year 2025. I'm coming to you from San Francisco. I'm celebrating my 62nd year in living in San Francisco. The first 23 years I lived in Northern Illinois. I've always wanted to do a video about my mother, but I found out that I really don't know anything about her early years. We never really had cameras, and they rarely took pictures. I only have 3 or 4 pictures of her, or maybe 5, in her whole life. It is unbelievable. And a quick overview, until she was around, I guess, 45, 44, she never had running water in the house. She never had a bathroom in the house. She had to go outside and pump water into pails and bring them in and heat them up to make food, to make bathing water, to wash clothes. I mean, unbelievable. She finally did get a vacuum cleaner in around 1947 or 48 and a wash machine. But she still had to put the hot water in and then dump it out and put the cold water in, rinse out the clothes and hang them on hangers in the outside in the summer and inside in the winter. So not only did she work from morning till night and keeping the house, she also had to work outside with my father. I mean, just what a life. I mean, ever since she was old enough. And I was told, I'm not sure if this is hearsay, but I heard that she was the oldest in the family, and she had several sisters and a brother. And every time her mother was pregnant, she stayed in bed most of the time, and my mother had to run the house and take care of everybody and everything. So anyway, even if this isn't true, I know that she did nothing but work all of her entire life and only got to enjoy all of the fruits of her labor the last couple of years of her life. This is the only picture I have of her as a baby, and it was 1906, and it was her christening. I found out when you're christened, your family is doing that so that if something should happen to you, you will go hopefully directly to heaven. But then when you become an adult or start to become an adult, you then are confirmed because you, as an adult, can say that you want to be a member of the church and believe in Jesus and go along with the rest of the community. The next picture I have is when she was 22. She was on the porch, I guess on the farm, and there's one other picture of her also. That picture is of the same outfit she's wearing, but she had a broom and she was sweeping the porch. So you have to wonder. Here she is, looking nice, and then she had to sweep the porch and have a picture of that taken. That was 1928. The next picture I have of her is 1940, and that's when I was born. And here's a picture of my sister, me, and my mother, all taken in front of the farm. I want to talk a little bit about the magic that she did for us. She had to get up at 6 or 7 in the morning and work till 8 at night most of the time, making meals, going out and working with our father on the farm, working with the chores, tilling the land, and so on. Just unbelievable. And then what would she do? After she worked for 12 hours a day, she would go in maybe at 9 at night and boil dozens of eggs and dye them and put them in baskets and put them up in the barn or under the trees in the front yard so that I could go out and look for them. I mean, all the things she did, dinners on Sunday and then big dinners on holidays. And she made sure that Christmas there was a tree, and like I'd come down and I'd be all sad because I didn't see anything for me, and they'd laugh because they had put a blanket over the bottom of the tree, and they'd lift it up and there were my presents. I was so impressed with Santa and also the Easter rabbit. All this my mother did for me, and I just wonder if I ever told her how much I loved her and how much she did for me. Now it's interesting, I went to a one-room school, and so did my sister. She graduated from 8th grade, and I started my 1st grade. This is a picture of me in the, of course, in the front row center. And if you look at the picture to your right is Carol Newberger, and to the left is Marilyn Ball. The three of us were in 1st grade. There were about 8 or 9 families that had children at the one-room school, and what was really nice was that we had PTA meetings every month. That was nice because the families got to get together after the chores were done and stuff, and we got to talk and chat, and they would talk about what the children needed to do as far as their studies were concerned, and then we played games. And then there was, the school layout itself was interesting. There was a big room with all the desks and everything, but in the front was a smaller room. I think it was like a cloakroom or something you'd call it. It had a table and it had places to hang your clothes and put your boots and all that sort of stuff, and to put your food that you took to school and your lunch pails and all that sort of stuff. And then after the meeting, they would, especially the women, would all make special desserts and put them out on the table, and everybody would have coffee and we could all gossip and everything and stuff. Well, the parents could anyway. But I do have a story to tell because I was precocious and I was always in trouble. And my poor mother had to put up with me. But she was so kind and she was artistic, and she always wanted me to be able to write poetry when I was 6 or 7 and do drawings and do all kinds of artistic things. So it was just so funny. No wonder my father wondered what was wrong with me. Anyway, I came home from school one day, the one-room school, and my parents and my sister were out doing the chores so they could get everything ready to go to the PTA meeting. I come home and I wander around the kitchen and I go, oh. Now, my mother was famous for making angel food cake, and she would make a cake in the afternoon, and then she'd take sugar, I'm not sure what kind it's called, anyway, she'd put some milk or something in it, and she'd heat it over the stove, and it would melt, and then she'd pour it all over the top of the cake, and it would run down in ringlets like all around the outside. It looked very professional, very nice, very tasty. So I'm walking around and I go, I wonder, I have small hands, and you know, the cake is round with a hole in the middle. I put my hand down in there and go, oh. So a little later, oh. So then my parents came in, and I think my sister stayed home, I'm not sure. But anyway, they came in and they were all excited, and they put the cake in the tin, and off we went to the school, and we had our class talks, and we had our games, and then all the food was put out, and everybody was all excited. One of the women was always pushy and know-it-all, and she, of course, said that my mother always made this really wonderful cake. and she hoped that she'd get the first piece, and a big one. And so they were all standing around waiting for the desserts, and my mother cut the cake and cut one big piece, and she stuck the knife underneath and lifted it up and put it on the woman's plate. And here's the cake with a big hole in the middle of it. And the woman says, "Oh my." She said, "You must have mice in your kitchen." And my mother stood there and looked around, and she saw me in the corner, and she said, "Yeah, we got a rat, actually. It's called Charles." Well, everybody thought that was hysterical. They all ate the cake anyway. It didn't matter. But I don't think I got any more cake. So anyway, I used to get in trouble all the time doing all kinds of things. And my mother was always there, though, to protect me and make sure that I was happy. So anyway, that's just part of the holiday magic that we had. Now, I was 8 or 9 years old, and I never did understand what was going on. One day, my mother said we were going to take a trip. A trip. We never went more than 50, 80 miles away from home. I don't know where we went, if we went to Chicago or Rockford, but we got on the train and we went to St. Louis, Missouri, to visit my aunt Esther and her husband. Now, he was very handsome, had a wonderful job. They had this nice ranch house with a big yard and barbecued in the back and stuff. And of course, I was very impressed and wondered why we weren't living like that. And we were there a few days, and then I think we took a bus to a little town called Mexico, Missouri. And there was my Aunt Evelyn and her husband and two of my nephews and nieces. And we had a really nice time, except my mother kept going and looking at me and shaking her head and going, because, loudmouth me, I'd say, "Well, what kind of a town is this? The main street's gravel. Why is it concrete? The path to the house is gravel. Even on our farm, we had a concrete walkway to the house." Well, my mother told me to behave. And then we had dinner, and we were told that we were having pumpkin pie. Oh, pumpkin pie. All those spices and sugar, and then maybe whipped cream on the top. So we sat down to dinner, and then the pie came out, and my mother went, and I went, "Uh-oh." She goes, and then I ate the pie, and I went, Well, her husband wouldn't let her buy sugar or spices or anything. They were living on the cheap, I guess. It's a good thing they got free shoes because he worked in a shoe factory. So I tasted it, and I went like, "Oh my God." It was just out of the can into the pie crust and baked. Nothing in it, no flavoring or anything. But I was good. I went and kind of ate it. I think I'm not sure if I slid it off the side and gave it to the dog. But anyway, even the dog wouldn't eat it. But we were spent a few days there, and then I'm not sure. It's so strange. We I think took the bus back to Rockford, and then from there we probably got picked up and was driven back to Pecatonica, where our farm was. But the local paper came out every 2 or 3 weeks, and it was interesting because the paper says Edna Buntjer and her son Charles just got back from a couple of weeks trip to Mexico. How exciting. Well, of course we had to laugh because it was Mexico, Missouri. Wasn't that funny? Here's one of the few other pictures I have of my mother. This time she's wearing pants, and my sister was, I guess, around 14 or so years old. And she took her aside one day, and she said, "You wear these dresses all the time, and you're out in the field in the stubble, and your legs are all ripped up and cut up." And she said, "Why in the world are you doing this? Why don't you wear pants?" My mother said, "Well, ladies, women don't wear pants and all this and that. My sister got mad and she said, this is ridiculous. So my mother did decide to try on a pair of overalls just out of curiosity. And well, she went out in the fields and came back and she said, I'm never going to wear a dress again when I'm out there working, doing the chores and stuff. She loved to dress up, but she certainly wasn't going to do it when she was working out in the fields and stuff. So now we get to around 1951, and all the work that my parents had done had paid off. The farm in Polo, Illinois, 160 acres. They ripped all the buildings down and built everything brand new. And the house, as you can see, was really in bad shape. And my mother was able to completely redo the entire house, rearrange the rooms. It was unbelievable. The bathroom was pink tiles and white tiles, and it had a pink tub and a toilet and sink. Because at that time in the 50s, tangerine and avocado and pink and whatever, rose were all popular colors. And the living room was unbelievable. They had a special carpet made in green swirled flowers, and the walls were this mint green plaster applied with a special tool to make indentations in it and stuff, and all new furniture, and just unbelievable. And Home and Gardens wanted to do a whole spread and feature it in their magazine, but my parents said that they didn't think they should because the neighbors would think we were being uppity. But I thought, well, that's really silly. Why wouldn't you want to do something like that? Why wouldn't you want to show how wonderful my mother was, that she could create this house in the middle of nowhere, basically, and have them want to put it on a world famous magazine? So we were situated in the house, and my sister came home one day. She was working in Rockford, and she had a young man with her, Ken. He was handsome. He was in his Navy outfit, and kind and sweet and hardworking. And a few weeks later, she took me aside and she said, what do you think about Ken? And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, you better grab that sucker now because somebody else will. She said, no kidding. Not long after that, they were engaged. Had to laugh. And then, of course, it was wonderful for my mother because she could plan this wonderful, wonderful wedding. It was so gorgeous in the little church in a little village next to our farm called Brookville, a little white church with a little creek behind it and oak trees around it. And I think she had about 50 or more people come to the wedding. The picture has me sitting there with Randall. We lit the candles all around the walls and up on the altar. And Nancy, my cousin, skipped down the aisle throwing rose petals all over and everything. And then afterwards, they looked at the presents, and then they had a sit-down dinner for about 40 or 50 people in the basement of the church. Just a wonderful, wonderful time. Well, all good things have to come to an end because in 1953, spring, my sister was married and she came from Rockford to the farm, and the four of us went to Dixon, Illinois, and I didn't know what was going on. They said, oh, your mother's having surgery. It's no big deal. I said, okay, fine. So we were there for about 4 or 5 hours, and they said that the operation was successful, and I had no idea what was going on. And we went back home, and she was in the hospital for 4 or 5 days. Then she came back, and she was going out all the time now. She'd get all dressed up, and she'd go to some ladies' clubs, and she'd go to the church, and she'd go. I found out later that she was a member of the Farm Bureau even. So she was not working on the farm anymore or doing anything, but she was traveling around doing all the things she always wanted to do all of her life and enjoying a house with actual running water and a bathroom and all that sort of thing. But I was kept in the dark. So 1953, June 2nd, Queen Elizabeth was having her coronation, and they had sent the films back within 24 hours, and New York put it on at midnight. It was the first time that they had gotten anything like that so fast, because usually it would take 2, 3, 4 days for anybody to be able to get the film and to broadcast it. So it was like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, no, 10 o'clock Illinois time, and my mother and I were sitting on the couch watching it. My father was in Pecatonica. For some reason, they still had the two farms, and it actually, he had the other farm for a couple more years, which caused a lot of problems with the two of us. But he was gone that evening, and I'm sitting there with my mother and watching the coronation, and suddenly she looked at me and she said, "I'm sorry, but could you help me?" And I said, "Well, of course I could help you." She said, "I have this salve, and I need to put it on to my surgery." And I said, "Oh, okay." Well, I didn't know she had cancer surgery. It was cut here all the way back to the lymph nodes, all the way back here. So, and she took her house coat open, and it was all radiation burns and slivers of flesh. And I sat there and I went, uh, uh, uh. And my mother said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I did this." She says, "I didn't mean to hurt you." And so then she closed it up and we sat and watched the rest of it. And I have a guilt complex all of my life because I didn't put that salve on her, but I couldn't do it. And she was sorry. She asked me to do it. I said, "Oh my God." So a few months went by, and she ended up the last month in the hospital, and then she came home, and they put her in a bed in the television room next to the kitchen, and she laid there for 3 weeks and was unconscious, and she was choking to death from the cancer in her throat. And I'd come home from school, and I walked by like this, and I wouldn't look at her. I just couldn't stand it. And I was out one afternoon with my father in the barn getting ready to milk the cows, and I go to walk out of the barn to go to the house. And I got about 30, 40 feet away, and I heard the door open on the barn, and my father came out and he yelled at me and he said, "Hey, you know your mother's going to die, don't you?" Well, I was traumatized enough anyway, but I just stood there for a while. I didn't look back, and I just went to the house, and that was the end of it. And then time went by, and I'm not sure what happened because my sister thinks the doctor came out and gave her a painkiller shot, but an extra one. So it's Thanksgiving morning, 1953, and I'm still in bed around 7:30 in the morning. I guess they didn't want to bother me. And my sister came upstairs, sat on the bed, and told me that our mother had passed away at 3:30 in the morning. And we cried and cried and cried. And then we said, "Oh, we were so thankful that she died." And then we cried and cried because we were thankful that she had passed away. But it was just so traumatic for me, especially, that they kept me in the dark. And then we had the funeral, and everybody and their mother was there, and I come in, and it's an open casket, which they really love to have. And the first thing they said was, "Your mother looks better than she ever has, and if you really loved her, you'd lean over there and give her a big kiss." Well, if I wasn't traumatized enough, I certainly was then, so guess what? I just turned around and walked away and sat down in the pew, and that was the end of that conversation. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, even though it had a sad ending, but I had a lot of wonderful memories with my mother and how wonderful she was to me. But still to this day, I feel sorry that I didn't tell her how much I loved her and how much I wished I could have done more for her, because she did as much as she could possibly do for me. But life moves on, and the next video I do will be about my father and what happens with the two of us and the future in my life. It's all very interesting. And on that note, cheers.